The MCU has grossed over $22 billion in the worldwide box office and is one of the flagpole franchises in Hollywood today. It was bound to appear on this list, and this isn't the last time either. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is number 96. Now, before I get started, if you haven't seen the MCU or haven't seen the first Captain America film, I recommend you watch the first bit of this video and then pause, watch the film, and probably Captain America: The First Avenger, and then The Avengers, and then Winter Soldier, and then watch the second bit of this video, because I'm going to be going into some of the development aspects of this film as well as some specific key plot elements, and I really don't want to spoil any of that for you if you haven't seen the film. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it and subscribe for more. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Captain America: The Winter Soldier was released in 2014 and was directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, otherwise known as the Russo brothers. And it stars, of course, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, Anthony Mackie as the Falcon, Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier, Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury, and then Robert Redford as the Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And this film follows, of course, Steve Rogers after the events of the Avengers and Captain America: The First Avenger, as he continues to learn more and more about the new world around him, what S.H.I.E.L.D. has become, and how he exactly fits into it all. All while a mysterious assassin is coming after him and his friends. The moment I saw this for the first time in 2014, I knew that this was special. Here you have a character who's sort of known as Marvel's Golden Boy, where Tony Stark is there to kind of break all of the rules and break the status quo. Cap has always been there to help maintain it for the good of the people. He's really always been there to protect the people around him as well as the general public with the orders of whoever's above him in the chain of command. However, here the filmmakers explore what a character like this does when his trust has been completely broken. And this results in a sort of spy espionage thriller inside of the MCU. In case you aren't familiar with the MCU, that stands for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, getting that out of the way. With backbreaking, grounded action sequences, it really gives us the first film of its kind within the franchise and really helped pave the way for more movies within the universe to be filmed like this. Really, this film proved that you didn't have to have huge, fantastical action sequences to qualify as a superhero film. Granted, Captain America: The First Avenger wasn't this massive film back whenever it was released in 2011, but this one really perfected the style of action its characters were going to be grounded in for the universe going forward. And speaking of characters, they incorporated all of the right ones that made sense in a film like this, incorporating ones that we had seen in the past as well as showing us some fresh faces. This film introduced us to Falcon and, of course, Winter Soldier, who now have their own Disney Plus show. Spoilers, do not watch that show before seeing this movie at the very least. And it, of course, incorporated Black Widow, who is a total scene stealer in this movie. And this film really serves to show the Black Widow movie that I wish that we had gotten. She is just perfect in this role as someone who is ingrained in this sort of spy espionage nature where Steve Rogers is kind of foreign to it and doesn't really understand it as well right now. Black Widow really shows that even though we know that she's a good guy from Iron Man 2 as well as the Avengers, she's still good at making you feel uncertain about her and her motivations, as well as what side she's really on. Chris Evans is, of course, perfect as Captain America. He is really good at giving off that classic Cap persona while also displaying his growing distrust of the people and organizations around him in this film. Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury obviously is great here. I love that Frank Grillo is given a supporting role here as one of the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I enjoy seeing Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan in this film as well. And Robert Redford is in this film as well, and just his incorporation here brings a sort of sense of legitimacy to the film as a whole. This is an MCU film for people who enjoy action thrillers and definitely help show that comic book films could be more than just this action-packed sci-fi mega movie. Even though this does have some sci-fi elements in it, for the most part, it's pretty grounded. It's about as grounded as you could be for a film about a super soldier frozen in time who transports decades into the future and fights crime. But this is absolutely reminiscent of the spy thrillers that you would see in the 70s or even the 80s, where you have this huge organization that almost appears to be too big to tear down, has people with massive amounts of power who feel like they can't be stopped, except it uses that sort of setting and makes it a superhero film, and it somehow works. Everybody here does a great job. The action is amazing, obviously, while also sort of feeling grounded. All of the performances here are great, where you don't really know what anybody's motivations are, aside from Steve Rogers, of course, so it always has you on edge as a viewer. If you have not seen the MCU, I would recommend watching a few things before watching this film. First, watch Captain America: The First Avenger. That's the first Captain America movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It'll give you a background on who Steve Rogers is and sort of where he's come from. And then the second thing that you should watch should probably be The Avengers. It won't really tell you a whole lot of new things about Steve Rogers aside from how he works with the group, but it'll give you some background on Natasha Romanoff or Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson's character, as well as who Nick Fury really is and how he sort of plays a role in this thing. But with a combination of its plot that has plenty of weight, the somewhat grounded action sequences, and its general tone, this film proves to be top-tier MCU for sure. If you haven't seen any movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you enjoy spy thrillers, I couldn't recommend this movie more. And with all of that being said, if you haven't seen Captain America: The Winter Soldier, go ahead and shut this video off, watch the film and maybe a few of the other films that I recommended, and then come back here for the second half of this video. Now, for everyone who has seen this film, I'm going to be going in depth on some of the development stories that I really like here, a few of the action sequences, as well as the importance of the Winter Soldier. And first off, whenever it comes to the development, I want to shed some light on the directors Joe and Anthony Russo. While they're known to be sort of the main directors of the MCU, having directed Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame after this film, they were actually competing for this job with a couple of other directors, one of which you may know, F. Gary Gray, who ended up withdrawing his name from consideration with this movie to go direct another film called Straight Outta Compton, which is very good as well. Actually ended up going on to direct the 8th Fast and Furious movie, Fate of the Furious. So even though that guy withdrew his name from the MCU, he definitely went on to be very successful in his own right. But whenever it comes to the Russo brothers, they actually had a background in comedy before directing this movie, having produced and directed shows like Arrested Development and Community. In fact, Kevin Feige, the head honcho over at Marvel, ended up seeking out the Russo brothers after seeing the season 2 season finale of Community, in which they kind of paid homage to the spy espionage sort of genre. And it turns out that these guys were the perfect fit for the MCU. MCU has always been known for its action, obviously. It's superhero films, so you know you're going to get that. But they've also, over the years, been known to have a lot of comedy ingrained in there as well. And so for directors who can effectively shoot action as well as sprinkle in layers of comedy into their films, they ended up being absolute perfect choices here, and really whenever you think about it, they help shape what the MCU is today. Whenever you think of some of the most iconic moments in all of the MCU, chances are these guys were directing it. So kudos to the Russo brothers. These guys helped shape the universe that ended up unfolding the next several years in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it wouldn't have been the same without them. They killed it with this movie, and I'm glad that they ended up getting hired by Marvel. And whenever it came to the filming of this movie, I found a few things pretty interesting. You know, with a big budget superhero movie like this, you're going to have plenty of green screen. I mean, just think about that scene whenever Nick Fury is showing Steve Rogers their whole arsenal of the ships that are going to be in the sky and shoot everybody. I forget the actual names of them, but that's basically what they are. But you have plenty of scenes here that were actually filmed on site, believe it or not. It filmed in Cleveland, Ohio, as well as Washington, D.C., of course, where this film takes place. And really, whenever it comes to where you're going to set this movie in, DC was the absolute perfect choice. Right from the get-go, whenever this film opens at the National Mall and you have those scenes at S.H.I.E.L.D. that overlook the Lincoln Memorial, you get a sense that this film is going to pay homage to the political thrillers from the 70s, from the 80s. So what better than to set this film in Washington, D.C.? And shout out to the stunt team, because apparently they were rehearsing a lot of these fight sequences months in advance, and they had a really hard job because what they wanted to do was incorporate of course, Cap's superhuman abilities, but also make it to where a lot of the action scenes felt more grounded. You know, you were coming from the Avengers, where everybody is fighting a alien race. You have a guy who turns into the Hulk. You have Iron Man there. You have a god of thunder coming from space. So obviously this film, wanting to shake that up a little bit, was going to feel different. So the stunt team had a hard job ahead of them, and I think that they killed it with this movie. That was an idea that the Russo brothers shared as well. Apparently, they took inspiration from the film Heat, as well as the film Mission Impossible, of having really intense action sequences where it felt like the protagonist was up against insurmountable odds at all times, and so the intensity level was always dialed up to an 11. I want to shed some light on a few of those action sequences, starting with the elevator sequence whenever Steve Rogers is packed in there with, I think, 8 Hydra agents. I'll fact check that whenever I'm editing this video. And somehow he makes it out of that building alive. But it is just so tense whenever you realize what's going on here, because obviously at this point in the movie, Nick Fury has been assassinated. Steve doesn't really know what's going on. He's coming down in the elevator from having a pretty tense conversation with Robert Redford's character, and you as a viewer are kind of getting the sense that things are not what they're supposed to be right now, and Steve might be in a little bit of danger. Whenever it's revealed that these guys are getting into the elevator to attack and arrest, hopefully just arrest Steve, is just accomplishing exactly what the Russo brothers intended whenever they wanted to make the action sequences in this film. I mean, how many 8 versus 1 fights have you ever seen that end up being very competitive, and then the one person going against the 8 guys ends up winning? And the other sequence that I like a whole lot is whenever Nick Fury is driving through the streets of DC. It might actually be Cleveland that they were filming it in. I'll check on that as well. Whenever Nick Fury is driving through the streets of DC and he is being chased down by who knows how many Hydra agents disguised as police officers. I really like the sequence for a few reasons. One, obviously, it's extremely tense, accomplishes what the Russo brothers wanted in their action sequences. Again, just like the elevator scene. And then also it has perfectly timed comedy in there layered into what would be a very tense sequence where obviously we don't want Nick Fury to die or anything, and we don't want these guys to get him. But they still find a way to incorporate great comedy in there in certain parts. And it has great use of the audio in the car as well that gives the situation to Nick Fury, how he is closed off from the communication systems. The window integrity is starting to go down a little bit. There are no police officers reported in the area, so it does a really effective job of putting the viewer in Nick Fury's shoes to raise the stakes here and let you know that things are not as they should be. And of course, it serves as a great introduction to the character of the Winter Soldier, whose theme is still one of the best character themes in the MCU today. In his presence and the musical shift that it takes with that score, it changes the entire tone of the scene. You know, you go from a really intense action sequence where it looks like Nick Fury is probably going to make it out okay to oh my gosh, who's this mysterious assassin? And he just basically took down Nick Fury. I mean, Nick Fury ends up escaping at the end of the day, but had he been anybody else, the Winter Soldier would have for sure gotten him. With that, I'm now going to talk about the character of the Winter Soldier and sort of what he meant for Steve's arc in this movie, as well as the MCU afterward. Whenever I was looking into making this video, for some reason I felt like they had revealed that the Winter Soldier was Bucky Barnes in the trailers, but I think what happened was I just looked it up beforehand. Like, I saw Sebastian Stan had been casted, and I knew that he played Bucky in the first film, so I just didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, he's Bucky Barnes. But I really wish I had saved that for the movie, and if anything, it makes me not want to look up anything about these MCU films before they come out, especially the new ones going forward, because the universe is about to get crazy. I really like that the Winter Soldier is Bucky, actually. It really serves as a challenge to Steve, who has just been lied to and betrayed this entire movie, really. Ultimately, it shows that Cap hasn't lost all hope. He won't fight Bucky in the end, even though he's been told that he can't trust anybody this entire movie. At the end of the day, he's looking at his best friend. He knows that he isn't himself, and he's not going to fight him. He trusts that Bucky is still in there somewhere, and that's why we love Steve Rogers. However, I will say now, after the events of this movie, Steve is less blind as to the people that he's taking orders from, and now he's sort of running the show. And this really helps set the scene for Civil War, where, the entire plot is Steve not taking orders from anybody in defense of his friend Bucky Barnes, who has been brainwashed to be the Winter Soldier. So if they stumbled at all with the introduction of the Winter Soldier in this movie, then they wouldn't have been able to bring in the next round of MCU films in a very compelling way. However, they stuck the landing here, and I'm happy that they did. Whenever you think about it, this film had a lot of things it had to do. It had to progress Steve's character in a way that made sense, but it also had to bring forth the events that would go on to happen in Civil War that ultimately impact Infinity War and Endgame. So I'm really glad it ended up being the Russo brothers directing all 4 of those, because I think they did an incredible job here. Everyone here does great, and just so happy that they were able to accomplish everything that they did with this film. It has some of my favorite action scenes in any movie, and is definitely one of a kind in this franchise. It had a huge impact on the MCU moving forward with the introduction of new characters, the storylines that it brings across, and the directors who would go on to direct some of the most impactful films in the entire franchise, as well as modern day film. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna complain anytime I get to watch an MCU film. I really enjoy all of the movies in that franchise. Even the ones that are a little bit lesser, I still have a fun time with them, but at the end of the day, I love this movie. I'm so glad that I was able to put this on the list for a little bit. It didn't look like it was going to make it. However, luckily it made it with some space as well. So, like I said at the beginning, this is not going to be the last MCU movie that I talk about. You have scenes that you really love or elements that you love, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective on this movie. Obviously, the MCU is a franchise that a lot of people have seen worldwide, so I'm sure there's no shortage of opinions here. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. I have 95 videos to go, and I'm looking forward to every single one of them. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you again for number 95.